So hello and welcome everyone to Business Spotlight. Today I'm joined by Nick Bone from Nicholas Howard. So Nick, a very warm welcome to Spotlight.
Thank you.
So Nick, how about we just kick off straight away and you can tell me a little bit about yourself and about Nicholas Howard and perhaps how long you've been in business for as well.
Sure. Well, yeah, my name is Nick Bone. I run Nicholas Howard. We're a small European-wide boutique, I suppose, recruitment business. I've been in recruitment for a long time, various different size organisations, but always planned to set the business up. So 13 years ago, I took the giant leap, as it were, and set Nicholas Howard up really with the proviso of being a client specialist above all things. So really getting into the detail of what clients look for in particular hires, as our primary focus, as opposed to necessarily a skill set focus or an industry focus, but really concentrating on individual clients. Obviously, I was working on my own at that stage. So that was 13 years ago, and we've grown to where we are today.
And Nick, how do you get Nicholas Howard to stand out from, in the sector? There's a lot of recruitment companies, isn't there? So how do you get to stand out?
Absolutely. That's one of my biggest challenges really was trying to think of a way of not just saying to potential new clients, hey, we're a recruitment business, we do the same as everyone else, but better. Trying to think of trying to be better, obviously, but also trying to be different. And my angle was really that client-centric approach, so sitting down with either division managers, if you like, or division heads of really big organizations or owners of smaller ones and saying, you don't necessarily need me to be an expert in skill set X, Y, or Z, or an expert in industry X, Y, or Z. You need me to be an expert in your organization and an expert in the kind of people you'd like to employ. That way, at any point in time, whatever skill set you need, you can pick the phone up to me and say, look, Nick, you know what a company ABC person looks and feels like. Find me one that can do sales, HR, finance. And that way you'll only meet people you like, and then you just choose the people with the most relevant skills out of the pile of people that you like. And that was successful really on two fronts, really. One, because that's genuinely what hiring decisions are made around, the kind of people we want to sit next to. And conversely, that's what most career decisions are made of. Who do I want to work with? Who do I want to work for? What's the culture of the organization? But secondly, it was a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, because the more opportunities you get to work with the same company, the more you learn more about their approach, their culture, the successful types of people, and therefore you get better at matching to that. And so as you work through the process, it obviously doesn't start from day one, but by the time you've worked with a company over a number of period of time, you kind of know who they're going to hire. So you therefore just get the versions of that individual. But more importantly, or as importantly, when you're speaking to a candidate, you can be genuinely honest with them about the organization, about the sorts of people that go well there. And then the candidates can make a more informed view about whether they want to put their hat in the ring, as it were, or whether this one's not for them. Because I'm a staunch believer that there's not good and bad people, there's suitable and not suitable people. So it's a case of they're all good, there's a suitable for one client or not suitable for another. So we can then draw down probably shorter shortlists, so the client spends less time interviewing and less time seeing people they're not going to hire, and more time with people that could be long-term employees.
Yeah, great. And I love that definition, the suitable and not suitable, not just good and bad.
Absolutely right. It's very rare in 20 years of recruitment. I've met very few bad candidates. I've met lots of people that won't enjoy particular environments and lots of environments that won't enjoy particular people. But I've met very few bad employers and I've met very few bad employees. It's just a case of who fits best together. Some people love big organizations. Some people love small organizations. Some people love people that are going to stay in their lane and just be excellent at one thing. Some people like people that will spread themselves out and do lots more. So it's a case of getting into that detail, understanding it, and selling it in the right way that the right people move forward.
Brilliant. And before we came the recording, you talked about your European-wide as well. You've got clients across Europe.
Yeah, that's right. I think that wasn't necessarily by design, but that was by virtue of the fact that I walk into a building of a business and say, we'll recruit whatever you need us to recruit. We're very much an extension of what they've got going on. I think it's very easy for recruiters to consider themselves experts in recruitment, walk into a client and tell them what they're going to do. I sit down and say, okay, what do you need us to do? Do we need to be everything from A through to Z? Or do we just need to find you CVs, or do we do any part of the middle piece? And if a client particularly recruits in Europe, we'll go to Europe and recruit for them. So most of the contact points that we start with are based in the UK, if I'm honest with you. We don't proactively sell into Europe. So most of our clients will be UK based with European operations rather than European based and no UK operations. But yeah, we make placements across all of Western Europe, and we've been as far afield as the US, Israel, Australia even, so on very odd occasions.
Brilliant. So, Nick, can you tell us a little bit then about your business journey so far, from when you started 13 years ago through to today?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a roller coaster. There's been some challenges along the way for sure. I was never particularly daunted by the idea of setting up on my own. My father ran his own business, so I didn't really have the challenge of, I don't know if I could do that, because for me it's quite a natural move, and I had a very easy person to go and speak to and ask about the challenges. And the second thing I often say about setting a business up on your own, the hardest thing is telling people about it and showing off about it. I've got lots of friends that are brilliant at things, but the skill they're good at, it could be an architect, it could be a builder, it could be whatever, the skill they're good at isn't showing off and telling people about it. Whereas my recruitment career had really been spent telling people about recruitment. I was just telling them about different organizations. So for me, the idea of setting up Nicholas Howard, and on Monday, the 4th of January, whenever it was, picking the phone up and selling wasn't particularly daunting, which I think is the toughest bit about setting up on your own. So I had that piece playing for me. And then the journey has been an interesting one, really. I set out as a permanent recruiter. We've always been contingent, no win, no fee. So a little bit scary from that point of view. And unless we're successful, I wasn't being paid. And I had 3 young children and a wife at home that I needed to support. But luckily for me, I had some good client support from the word go. And because of our solution, we were selling often exclusivity. And so therefore I knew that as long as I filled the roles, there was always going to be a payday, which was a way of doing it. Then I think the challenge for every small recruiter is that moment where you recruit somebody else to work for you. And I was really lucky with the lady Victoria, the lady that I first hired, who was outstanding and had exactly the same morals as me, integrity as me, and those sorts of things. So built very similar client relationships to me. And then the next biggest challenge, probably apart from the wider macro challenges that everyone felt, was that moment of moving from being a permanent recruiter where the overheads are very easily controlled to being a contract and temp recruiter where you're obviously responsible for paying people for the work that they do, and you don't necessarily get paid by clients as quickly as you need to pay your candidates. And so that was a stretch for me, to be honest with you, because obviously when you set a business up, you think, okay, what am I good at? I'll do that. And then you don't realize that you have to be able to write cash flows and do budget forecasts and go and speak to bank managers and arrange funding and that kind of thing. So that was an interesting and scary thing, but I quite enjoyed those sorts of challenges. And then the wider macro things have been things like, from a very specific recruitment perspective, IR35 was a big change of legislation for us, which we had to steer through. The pandemic was obviously a huge challenge. And we really started off anyway off the back of the very first financial crisis. And my background had been finance and financial services, so a lot of our early clients were in that space, so that was quite challenging as well. But we've remained relatively small with relatively low overheads and been able to there's been some difficult times and difficult conversations within there, but managed to steer through it just about. I'm touching wood, hoping that continues.
So then looking ahead to the future, what are the plans, the ambitions, aspirations for the business, and perhaps some of the challenges as well?
Yeah, I think it's really, really interesting. I'm 46. I've got a long time of work ahead of me, and I've got 3 young children that have got kicked to university and all those sorts of things. I'm often asked by people, what are your goals for the business? Do you want to sell it? Do you want to do this, that, the other? And I must admit, I quite like running the business. So I've probably got more ambitions to grow it slowly rather than grow it quickly and sell it, if that makes any sense. But equally, I'm quite keen to enable the business to run more efficiently and productively without me in it as well, to kind of future-proof the business from that risk point of view. So it's then just training up the people within the business to be able to take on some of the stuff that I do. I think it's a big expectation to have any employee to love a business the way the owner does, but I'm really lucky with the team that I've got. They all put in way more than they probably need to and go over and above. And so for me, the next journey will be, I'd love to get the business to a situation. I always describe it as the John Lewis model, where everybody owns a part of it. Obviously, everyone owns different amounts, but to go through that journey and think about, okay, how do I do share schemes and those sorts of things that I've never spoken about or thought about yet, but move from a situation where it's wholly owned by me to it's owned by me and the team, and eventually there'll be a point in time where, whether I'm there or not, the business will carry on being successful and can be successful for those guys and the next generation of Nicholas Howard employees and that sort of thing.
Great. Well, you've definitely got the right mindset there, working on developing the business
I hope
and
so.
that investment in the team. Absolutely, yeah. So some of the challenges you've talked about there. What about challenges specifically within recruitment, within, to get the business to grow?
Yeah, I think challenges in the recruitment, I think, are twofold. Really, it's one, realizing that it's hard work, and I think there were probably times, certainly even in my career before Nicholas Howard, where it was relatively easy to do okay in recruitment, but things have changed slightly. I think some people got used to thinking that you could put in 80% of the effort and get 100% of the reward. It isn't that. It's an industry for people that like talking to people. It's an industry for people that like to work hard and understand that if you do well, you'll be nicely rewarded. But it isn't easy. So for me, it was making sure that I kept educating myself to think, do you know what, to be creating value for clients, I need to make sure that we don't keep putting our fees up every year. We don't keep becoming sillily expensive. We need to be a cost-effective solution for these organizations, but without any degradation in the levels of service. And so therefore to control the costs behind the scenes and this kind of thing. So I think it would be easy to get carried away with the good months and the good quarters and grow your cost base. And then all of a sudden, when things get tough, not know quite what to do. So I've tried to keep a control of that. I think any business owner, one of the things I was told by a close friend of mine was, don't be loyal to a bad idea. And I think when you set up on your own, the only ideas you have are your own. And so you assume they're good because no one thinks they have bad ideas. But asking for help, asking for guidance and thinking, actually, I thought that, but that doesn't make that right. That was my best idea at that point, but I've got this person over here with other good ideas. And be prepared to abandon what was a bad idea, even if you've deep down, your pride hurts because of it, but not being precious and being able to say, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's follow that. And that works two ways. One, it means that you then start to find out what you don't know. I think it's easy to make the mistake of not knowing what you don't know. But it also empowers the people whose idea it was. So one of the things I've seen in the development of my team is that moment where I've started to think, actually, Nick, you're not the be all and end all here. You're okay at recruitment and hopefully you're a nice enough manager, but you're not the one that knows everything. So giving ideas headroom and room to grow, and then seeing them succeed, and then seeing the extra value that brings to the people whose ideas they were, has been probably the best learning for me in the business, really. Not be so stubborn about always my ideas being the best ones. It's a bit tough for me because I like to think I'm always right. I had to adjust my thinking somewhat. And I don't know, the team will probably tell you I've not got that right yet, but I'm working on it.
Excellent. So you've talked a little bit there about a lesson then. Is that one you would choose, or is there something else that you would share with our audience as being in business or starting up as a lesson that you would share?
Yeah, I think for me, if I went back in and did it all again and tried to kind of take on some of the things that I've learned in this first 13 years, it would be, don't get carried away by the bright lights of the size of the deal. Always analyze the size of the margin and the profit in the deal. Right. It's very easy to think, I can remember now looking back at parties showing off about the size of a client that I just won. But actually, when you analyze it, because of the margin you've had to agree to, it's not quite as exciting as it perhaps looks. So making sure you don't get blinded by those bright lights, but absolutely 100%, that whole idea of you don't know what you don't know. So embracing new ideas, embracing other people's ideas, and being prepared to say, this was my idea, but it wasn't the best one. So we're going to go with this one, or ask people, what do you think about my idea? But I think when I first started doing that, I asked it in a way that kind of made people think they had to agree with it, whether they liked it or not. And so it's making sure you enable people and give them the power, the stability that they're allowed to challenge you. And you might not agree, but that's a safe place. And I think it's very easy when you're the kind of owner manager to get what you want all of the time, but think everyone's along with you rather than they're doing what they're told. So I've had to constantly, as I say, because I'm a relatively confident, outspoken, probably challenging kind of person, it's difficult to challenge me back. And so I try and create an environment where people feel safe doing that and knowing that I'm not going to throw my toys out of the cot and affect their career chances. So it's embracing that you employ people because you think they're great. So what's the point of then not letting them be great? And employ people that are good at what you're not good at. That's the other thing. Make sure that you look at your own game and constantly analyze it. And if you're excellent at one position, don't employ someone else to play that position. Employ someone to play a position you're not so good at, and then let them play it. Don't try and play that position for them as well. So I don't think I've got that right 100% by a long stretch, but I'm trying really hard, and I've got an excellent kind of right-hand man called Josh, who keeps me on the straight and narrow, and I think he feels confident and stable enough to be able to challenge me and keep me honest from that point of view as well. Hopefully, I hope that's the case.
And Nick, at the beginning, you mentioned that your father had run his business as well. How beneficial has being around him been in starting your own business? Because some people don't have that benefit, do they?
No, absolutely, and I'm sure that's the single most influential reason why Nicholas Howard has survived and even was off the ground, because at no point did I ever think it's not possible. I always assumed I would have my own business, and probably it happened slower because I was really enjoying the companies that I worked for. I worked for some great organizations, and more importantly with some great people, and so I constantly didn't want to walk away from that, but I always considered setting up my own business is absolutely an option. I've seen my dad do it, albeit he ran his own business for 36 years. So I was quite young when it happened. But I was there through the stages. I could sit him down, and the first piece of advice he gave me, and I'm sure it was good advice. He said, "What are you going to call the business?" And I said, "Well, probably Nick Bone Recruitment." And he said, "Well, don't call it Nick Bone Recruitment, because then it'll always sound like you're just you." He said, "Think of a different name. Then you could be Nick Bone from company XYZ. And then when you have other people come to work for you, it won't always look like an owner-managed business. You'll be able to look like a slightly bigger organization if you need to." So Howard's my middle name, so it wasn't hugely imaginative. So rather than being Nicholas Bone Recruitment, we became Nicholas Howard Recruitment. But I think that was good advice in terms of always look for where you're going to get to. From day one, Nick Bone Recruitment would have worked, but perhaps once you've got an employee or you're pitching to clients and you want to be taken slightly more seriously, or you want to look like you're running a business rather than just self-employed, if that's the right word. That was good advice. And then obviously he was able to talk to me about, these are the things that you're going to need. This is the sorts of bank accounts and all the practical stuff. And he let me borrow his accountancy software so I could work out how that would work. And my mum did the bookkeeping for my father, so she did my accounts for the first few years. All those sorts of things did make that getting it off the ground from an admin point of view slightly easier. And I was therefore able just to focus on picking that phone up and trying to get people to let me work for them.
Excellent. So paying advice forward then, if you were to go and meet 18-year-old Nick, what's one piece of advice you would give Nick at age 18 about either starting up in business or being in business?
Yeah, gosh, 18-year-old me. I think back to when I was 18. When I was 18, I was 100% sure I knew everything. I was 18-year-old expert in the world, and it must have been extremely frustrating, I should think, for my friends and family. So it would be sit back and take more advice. I don't think you can ever be given too much advice in business, because it's your right to choose whether you take it or not. So if you're qualified to choose what advice is good, then you should take every bit of advice you can and then be confident in your decision making around that's good advice, that's poor advice. So surround yourself with good people. Remind yourself that they're good people. So when they say something you don't want to hear, don't write them off as a bad person, write them off as a good person telling you something you need to know. I think it's very easy, again, going back to, you probably need a reasonable sized ego to set your own business up, but you need to keep that ego in check to make sure that when people that ordinarily like and trust say something you don't want to hear, that isn't because they're not someone you like and trust anymore. It's because you didn't want to hear that message, but you probably needed, those are the messages you need to hear. So when my dad told me something that I didn't want to hear when I was 18, I probably argued back and stormed off. But looking back now as a dad, I can hear myself saying those things, which is cheesy, and I'm sure everyone says that. But I don't think I would be any less confident, but I would be less headstrong and able to absorb and take on board other people's advice and guidance in the way that it's meant, rather than the way that I receive it. You choose how you receive guidance, and you should receive it the way that it's meant, not in the way that you might take it because you're too precious about your own idea to want to be wrong. So that would probably be what I would say to myself. But if I was 18, I'd probably ignore that advice as well.
Yeah,
I'm not sure it would make any difference.
I think we all do, don't we? But
yeah.
So Nick, you've obviously had a hugely successful career. You got successful business, big plans for the future, or to grow the business even further and develop the team with it. So what inspires you to keep doing what you do?
Gosh, yeah, I've been thinking about this question. I think it's very easy, but it's very true that, when you've got a young family and a family that are going from being very young to going to university and those sorts of things, there's the financial obligations inspire you. There's no two ways about it. I think all of us go to work because we want to allow a lifestyle. That definitely inspires me. And seeing my children see the work ethic that I've got, and hopefully they'll take that out into the workplace as well. But from a day-to-day business point of view, I went into recruitment because I'm fascinated by people and people's stories, and I'm constantly inspired by the changes in what people want in life and how they go about getting them. And so I'm inspired by the ability to give space to the guys in my team to grow and develop. And I love watching, I got excited this month because we've had the first Nicholas Howard person retire. She's been with us for nearly the whole 13 years. And that's very exciting from a point of view, thinking, well, we've been around long enough that people have come to that point. We had someone recently go off on maternity leave, and that's exciting because it's just watching the world of work around you develop, and seeing people move from being account managers to account directors and these sorts of things. I find that sort of thing inspiring. But I just love people's stories, whether it's a client telling me about how their organization works, whether it's a candidate telling me about what they do and why they do it and how they do it. And one of the best things about our client-centric model is that we don't just stick in any given lane. We don't just recruit accountants and therefore speak to the same kind of people over and over and over again, and it get a little bit stale. We speak to clients and candidates on a daily basis for roles, anything from facilities, administration, HR, sales, through to really, really specific life sciences and aerospace and technology projects in and around the UK and Europe. And so, meeting people in Scandinavia and finding out how they approach work and the differences in just their work patterns and those sorts of things, and gathering that knowledge together, I just find it fascinating. So that is probably, other than the fact that the bills that we all need to pay at home and looking after the family, that's probably my key inspiration each day.
Right. I think you've hit upon something, because we were at BizX last week, and one of the came up consistently from the international speakers was the word curiosity, which is what exactly you
right.
talked
Yes,
about, constantly being curious. And I just think that's exactly what you've expressed. So it's a great,
yeah. Oh, good.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that, Nick. So lastly, is there any news you'd like to share about Nicholas Howard?
Well, actually, yeah, this is good timing, because we're just in the process of finalising and launching our latest. It's a kind of mixture of salary survey and quality and diversity, inclusivity survey of the market. We've always struggled historically with great salary surveys because we work across so many different areas. And so typically in recruitment, you would get from a finance recruiter a salary survey and all roles to do in finance, and X, Y, and Z for different areas. And because we work across the spectrum, we've always found it very difficult to write a salary survey that's pertinent to any given client, because client A might not be interested in the same news as client B. But the equality and diversity piece obviously sits across any organization, whether it's a tiny organization or a massive global organization. And we were just walking through some of the data for that last week, and Josh and I have got a meeting later on today to look at, it's the first draft, so it'll be a few weeks until it's out. And I'm always get excited by that, because each time we do one, they go from being a printed ring-bound copy that you mail out to people to then being a link to something, and the technology behind just how it's produced and looks is quite exciting this year. So we're quite excited to get that launched and share that. And we share that with clients and potential clients and candidates, and as many people as interested to receive it. So if anyone wants it, we'd be very happy to share it with them.
Yeah, well, if you share it with me, I'll make sure it's on our description of this video recording.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, it's not finished yet, but once it's done, I'll share it with you. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, Nick, I think that's the end of our questions that we kind of set for ourselves today. So thanks so much. It's been fascinating to learn about you and about Nicholas Howard. So I'm going to let you get your week finished up so you can start the bank holiday weekend.
Wonderful. Thank you. Nice to meet you, and thanks for your time.
My pleasure, Nick.